crashed onto my neighbor's gazebo. How was I supposed to know that standing up for myself would unravel $1 million fraud scheme and bring the FBI to our quiet suburban doorsteps? Comment below where you're watching from. Blood rushed to my head as I slammed on the brakes in my driveway. My beautiful oak tree, the one that had shaded my home for 15 summers, was being hacked apart by men in neon orange vests. The roar of chainsaws filled the air as I jumped out of my car, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Stop! What are you doing to my tree?" I shouted, running across the lawn. The workers paused, exchanging uncertain glances. But a woman in a pristine ivory pantsuit marched toward me from next door. Linda Cartwright, the self-declared queen of Maple Glen Estates, with her flawless silver bob and permanent scowl. "Finally, someone's dealing with this menace," she said, arms folded over her chest. "Your leaves clog my gutters every fall, and the roots are cracking my driveway." I ignored her and approached the man who seemed to be in charge. "This is my property. Who authorized this?" I demanded. "HOA approval, ma'am," he said, handing me a crumpled document bearing an official-looking stamp, signed by none other than Gregory Daniels, the HOA president and Linda's frequent tennis partner. I should have known. "I never received any notice about this," I said, scanning the paper with trembling hands. The letter had looked legitimate, but something felt off. I'd paid my dues religiously for years, followed every absurd rule about trash bins and seasonal decorations. "Notice was sent 2 weeks ago," Linda chimed in, her voice oozing fake sweetness. "Maybe if you checked your mailbox once in a while." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from my elderly neighbor, Harold. "Saw the tree crew. Did they finally wear you down?" Harold had been battling the HOA for years over his bird feeders. He understood. "This stops now," I declared, pulling out my phone to take pictures, "until I verify this with the board." The crew chief shrugged. "Lady, we're just doing what we're paid for. Take it up with management." As I dialed Gregory's number, a sickening crack split the air. One of the half-cut branches, a massive limb, thicker than my waist, gave way. The workers scrambled back as the enormous branch crashed down with a thunderous boom, right onto Linda's beloved gazebo. The white lattice structure, featured in no fewer than 3 neighborhood newsletters, splintered like matchsticks. Her prize-winning azaleas were buried under shattered wood and leaves. Her scream could have shattered windows. "My gazebo! Do you see what your tree did?" she screeched, pointing a manicured finger at me, her face flushing a dangerous red. "This is exactly why it needed to come down." The crew chief let out a low whistle. "That's going to be expensive." My call to Gregory went straight to voicemail, of course. "This is your fault," she hissed, already tapping furiously on her phone. "Gregory will hear about this immediately. You'll be paying every penny in damages." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Your friend Gregory authorized cutting down my tree without my consent. If anyone's responsible for that branch falling, it's the people who weakened it by cutting it improperly." Linda's eyes narrowed. "We'll see what the board has to say about that." As if summoned by her fury, a sleek black SUV pulled up. Gregory Daniels stepped out, his golf tan stark against his white polo shirt, clipboard already in hand. "I got your text, Linda," he said, not even glancing in my direction. "Oh my, that's quite a mess," I said, stepping into his line of sight. "Your crew is cutting down my tree without my consent." He finally acknowledged me with a thin smile. As per HOA Bylaw 7.2, trees deemed hazardous can be removed at the board's discretion. We've had 3 complaints about that oak. Let me guess, Linda, you, and your wife. I crossed my arms. Show me where in the HOA agreement it says you can enter private property without notice. Gregory's smile didn't waver. Notice was sent, and now we have property damage that proves our point about safety concerns. I felt like I was trapped in a bizarre nightmare. The tree was perfectly healthy. The damage happened because your crew started cutting it. That's not how the report will read, interjected Linda smugly, snapping pictures of her ruined gazebo from every angle. I noticed neighbors now peeking through windows, some stepping out onto their porches. This was becoming the neighborhood drama of the week. Harold was standing on his driveway now, watching quietly, concern etched into his face. "Listen," Gregory said, lowering his voice. "The tree's coming down one way or another. The board voted. If you fight this, we can make things very difficult. HOA fines add up fast." The threat hung heavy in the air. I'd heard stories of people losing their homes over HOA disputes. I'd heard of it, sure, but I never thought I'd be one of them. "I'm calling my lawyer," I said, pulling out my phone again. Gregory shrugged. "Do what you need to do, but that gazebo repair bill is coming your way either way." As they walked off, I heard Linda mutter, "I told you he'd be difficult, just like with the bird bath last year." The tree crew looked uneasy. "Do we keep going?" one asked. "No," I said firmly, "not today." That evening, I stayed up researching HOA laws and taking photos of every angle of my property. The partially cut oak looked wounded, its exposed rings pale against the darker bark. When I finally checked my mail, which I admittedly hadn't done in days due to a business trip, I did find a notice. It was dated yesterday. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Around 3 a.m., a noise outside startled me awake, a car door slamming shut. I peeked through the blind just in time to catch Gregory's SUV pulling away from the curb. What was he doing here at this hour? The mystery deepened the next morning when I opened my mailbox to find a certified letter. The Maple Glen Estates Homeowners Association was suing me for $228,000 in damages to Linda's property. They included photographs of the fallen branch and the destroyed gazebo, along with a structural engineer's report dated 3 weeks ago, claiming my tree was diseased and dangerous. 3 weeks ago? But Linda had only begun complaining about it last month. Something wasn't right. I had a sinking feeling this went deeper than just a tree and a wrecked gazebo. As I stared at the lawsuit papers, my phone rang. It was Harold. "I saw Gregory sneaking around your yard last night," he said, skipping any greeting. "You need to check your property line. I think there's something about your land they want." My hands trembled as I tore open another certified letter that had just arrived. The return address read, Maple Glen Estates Homeowners Association. My stomach dropped before I even read a word. "We hereby inform you that legal action has been initiated against you in the amount of $28,000 for damages caused by your negligence." I nearly spat out of my coffee. $28,000 for a tree they cut down without my consent? The letter accused me of failing to maintain hazardous vegetation, which had led to catastrophic property damage to Mrs. Cartwright's gazebo. Attached were full-color photographs of the ruined structure and repair estimates from, of course, Gregory Daniels Construction Company. The phone rang again. "Linda, I just wanted to make sure you received the HOA's letter," she said, her voice sticky with fake concern.
It's such a shame about my poor gazebo. My daughter was planning her wedding reception there next month. Mrs. Cartwright, your people cut down my tree without permission. How is this my fault? I tried to keep my voice steady. Well, if you had maintained your yard properly, none of this would have happened, she sniffed. The board has documented 12 separate complaints about that eyesore. We were acting in the community's best interest. After I hung up, I paced my kitchen, heart racing. I couldn't afford a $28,000 payout. I couldn't even afford the lawyer I'd need to fight it. Was I really about to lose my house over this? A knock at the door pulled me out of my spiral. It was Harold, holding a six-pack. "Heard about the tree situation," he said. "Figured you could use this." I invited him in, grateful for any friendly face. Harold had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, long before Gregory Daniels became HOA president. "This isn't the first time they've pulled something like this," he said, settling onto my couch. "Last summer, the Morgans got fined $500 because their mailbox was painted desert taupe instead of coastal beige. The difference was barely noticeable, but Gregory claimed it violated community standards." "How do they keep getting away with this?" I asked. "Most folks just pay up. It's easier than fighting," Harold said, shrugging. "Gregory stacked the board with his friends. His construction company gets all the maintenance contracts. Mrs. Cartwright's husband sits on the zoning board that green lights Gregory's developments downtown. It's all connected." My phone buzzed, an unknown number. "Saw what happened to your tree. Check your property survey." A concerned neighbor. "Do you have your property documents?" Harold asked. "From when you bought the place?" I dug through my filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder labeled Closing Documents. Inside was the original property survey, one I'd never paid much attention to before. Harold and I spread the papers across the dining table. The survey clearly showed property lines, easements, and existing structures. My eyes landed on the tree, or where it had been. "Harold," I whispered, pointing, "look at this." The tree was clearly marked as being 2 feet inside my property line, not on the HOA common area as Gregory had claimed. A sticky note from my real estate agent even highlighted it. "Mature oak tree adds value. Protected." "They had no right to touch it," Harold said, shaking his head. "The HOA has zero jurisdiction over trees fully on private property."
The tree was on my property. I felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by anger. They knew. They must have known. I snapped photos of the property survey with my phone and began searching online for HOA tree removal disputes. The results were staggering. Forums were filled with similar stories, news articles about lawsuits, even law firms that specialized solely in HOA conflicts. At midnight, as Harold was heading out the door, he paused. "Be careful," he warned. "Gregory doesn't like to lose. When the Morales family challenged a violation last year, someone slashed their tires the next day. No proof it was him, of course." I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the moment I came home to strangers cutting down my tree, the arrogance on Gregory's face, Linda watching from her porch, that smug smile never leaving her lips. At 3 a.m., I started drafting a response letter. By dawn, I had created a digital folder packed with evidence, before and after photos of the tree, images of the damaged gazebo, my property survey, and a printed copy of the Maple Glen Estates HOA bylaws. Section 7.3 clearly stated, "The association shall not remove or significantly alter any mature trees on private property without written consent of the homeowner." Around 8 a.m., my doorbell rang. It was Linda Cartwright again.
this time holding a plate of muffins. I felt terrible about our conversation yesterday. I thought maybe we could talk about a payment plan for the damages. I know $28,000 is a lot all at once. I glanced at her freshly styled hair, designer blouse, and the gleaming Mercedes parked in my driveway. This woman didn't care about me or my tree. This was about power. Actually, Mrs. Cartwright, I said calmly, I've been reviewing my property documents, and it seems there's been a mistake. That tree was entirely on my private property, which means the HOA had no authority to cut it down. Her face hardened. Well, I'm sure Gregory had proper approval. From whom? The tree was on my property. I never gave permission. In fact, according to Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws, what happened might actually qualify as destruction of private property. Her face hardened. You really don't want to make enemies here. We've built a nice community with nice property values. Nobody wants a troublemaker. As she walked off, my phone pinged. Subject: Urgent Lien Notice, Maple Glen Estates, HOA. My blood ran cold. They were placing a lien on my house for the unpaid damages. Could they really take my home over a tree I never wanted cut down? What dark secrets was this perfect neighborhood hiding behind its manicured lawns and matching mailboxes? My hands trembled as I pushed open the glass doors to the community center. The monthly HOA meeting was already underway. Around 30 neighbors sat in orderly rows, facing the board members on their elevated stage. I spotted Linda Cartwright in the front row, her platinum blonde bob looking like it had cost more than my monthly mortgage. "Excuse me," I said loudly, cutting off Gregory mid-sentence as he droned on about new pool regulations. Heads turned. Some neighbors looked away. Others stared, openly curious. I had never spoken at these meetings before. Gregory's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We have a procedure for bringing up new business. You needed to submit your request 2 weeks in advance. I think destroying my property without permission jumps to the front of the line," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. The room went silent. Linda stood, clutching her designer handbag like it might fly away. "That eyesore was dropping leaves and branches into my yard for years. My husband nearly broke his ankle last fall." "Please sit down, Margaret," Gregory said smoothly. "Sir," he continued, turning back to me, "if you have a complaint, you can fill out the proper form. And I've already filled out your forms 3 times, I said, stepping to the center of the room. "While I waited for a response that never came, you sent a crew to cut down my tree without my consent. And now you're suing me for the damage your people caused." A murmur spread through the crowd. I caught Harold in the back, giving me a quiet thumbs up. Gregory's jaw tightened. "That tree was in clear violation of HOA landscaping guidelines, Section 8, Paragraph 3, which states nothing about trees that predate the HOA's existence," said a calm, firm voice behind me. I turned. Walking in through the double doors was Diana Ross, briefcase in hand, dressed in a crisp navy suit. She looked every bit the powerhouse attorney. I had found her through Harold's recommendation. She specialized in property disputes, and she had taken down HOAs before.
"And you are?" Gregory asked, clearly irritated by yet another interruption. "Diana Ross, attorney at law," she said smoothly. "I represent the homeowner whose property rights were violated when this board authorized the destruction of a mature maple tree valued at approximately $15,000. Linda Cartwright scoffed loudly. "$15,000 for that ugly tree? Ridiculous."
Diana smiled faintly. Actually, that's a conservative estimate from our arborist. Mature trees increase property value substantially, which I'm sure this board is aware of, given your focus on community standards. I stepped forward and placed my property survey on the projector. The digital image lit up the screen, clearly displaying my lot boundaries with the maple tree situated 2 feet inside my property line. As you can see, I told the room, pointing at the diagram, the tree was entirely on my property. The HOA had no right to touch it. The room erupted in murmurs. A woman in the back called out, "Gregory, is this true? Was the tree on private property?" Gregory's face turned a mottled red. "The survey must be outdated. Our landscaping jurisdiction extends—" "Your jurisdiction ends at my property line," I cut in firmly. "And I have not only the original survey from when the house was built, but a second, up-to-date survey from last year when I installed the garden shed. Both confirm the same boundaries." Linda shot up from her seat again. "This is absurd! That tree was a menace! It blocked my view of the sunset! My property values were suffering!" Diana raised an eyebrow. "Interesting that you'd bring up property values, Mrs. Cartwright, because cutting down a neighbor's tree without permission is actually a criminal offense in this state. And the HOA board authorizing it could be considered conspiracy to commit property damage." One of the other board members, a nervous-looking man named Jenkins, leaned over and whispered something to Gregory. Gregory waved him off impatiently. "We acted in good faith based on multiple complaints. The tree posed a safety risk." "Then why didn't you get an arborist's report to support that claim? Because I have a certified assessment from last spring stating the tree was perfectly healthy." I handed out copies of the report to each board member. Several neighbors stood up to get a closer look. Gregory barely glanced at it before tossing it aside. "This changes nothing. The tree fell and damaged Mrs. Cartwright's property. You're responsible for that damage as the tree's owner." Diana's smile tightened. It wasn't friendly. "Actually, when someone improperly cuts a tree and causes it to fall, they assume liability for any resulting damage. Your contractors cut the tree against the owner's explicit wishes, which directly caused the branch to fall." Linda's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. "This is ridiculous! Gregory, do something!" Another neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, who I barely knew, stood up. "I'd like to know why the board approved cutting down a tree on private property without the owner's consent. That doesn't seem right." Gregory banged his gavel. "This discussion is over. We'll address the matter privately with the parties involved." "Actually," Diana said calmly, "our client would prefer transparency, which is why we've prepared this." She handed packets of documents to each board member. "This is our countersuit for the tree's value, emotional damages, and trespassing." The room exploded. Several neighbors crowded around to see the documents. I noticed some of them snapping photos on their phones. "You can't sue the HOA!" Gregory shouted, jumping to his feet. "The HOA agreement specifically states that all disputes must go through our arbitration process first." "I've reviewed your agreement carefully," Diana replied, still smiling. "It doesn't cover criminal trespass or destruction of private property. Additionally, we've filed a police report regarding the unauthorized entry and property damage." The color drained from Gregory's face. Linda looked like she might actually faint. "This meeting is adjourned," Gregory barked, banging his gavel repeatedly. As neighbors began filing out, some whispering, others openly chatting, I was surprised by the number of people who approached me with quiet words of support. "They've gone too far this time," one elderly man muttered. "That board thinks they own everything," said another. As Diana and I walked toward the exit, Gregory caught up to us in the hallway. The polished charm he wore in public had completely evaporated. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he hissed, grabbing my arm tightly. "I have connections in this town. I can make your life miserable." Diana calmly reached over and removed his hand from my arm. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Mr. Daniels. Would you care to rephrase, with witnesses present?" Gregory stepped back, adjusting his tie. "I'm simply advising your client that fighting the HOA is a losing battle. Everyone who's tried has regretted it." We walked into the parking lot. I felt a mixture of triumph and dread churning in my stomach. "What happens next?" I asked Diana. "They'll try to intimidate you into dropping the countersuit. Stand firm. I've seen bullies like Gregory before. They fold when challenged properly." What I didn't tell her was that I'd spent the night before digging into Gregory Daniels online. His construction company had multiple complaints filed against it. And strangely, it seemed like that same company was getting every maintenance contract from our HOA. And when I dug deeper, I found...
Something I found made my blood run cold. Something about Gregory Daniels's connections that would change everything about this fight. The doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. Still in my pajamas, I opened the door to find Detective Rodriguez standing there, holding 2 coffee cups. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. This couldn't wait. Her tone was serious, no trace of small talk. My hands trembled as I took the coffee. Just yesterday, I'd filed what I thought was a simple police report about my illegally cut tree. Now, a detective was standing in my kitchen before breakfast. "Your HOA president, Mr. Daniels," she began, setting a thick folder on the table. "His name set off alarms in 3 departments." I blinked. "Because of my tree?" She shook her head. "Your tree was just the tip of the iceberg." She spread out photos across the table. "See these maintenance trucks parked at your community center last summer? That's Daniels Construction. They billed Maple Glen Estates $65,000 for emergency roof repairs that should have cost maybe $20,000. My jaw dropped. That's why our HOA fees jumped last year. Gregory told us it was due to insurance costs. "It gets worse," Rodriguez said, flipping through highlighted invoices and bank records. "Every single maintenance contract in Maple Glen Estates for the past 5 years has gone to Daniels Construction. No competitive bids, no board oversight, just Gregory signing off payments to himself." "But that's illegal," I said, stunned. "How could no one have caught this?" "Fear and friendship," she said simply. "Any board member who objects either gets hit with HOA violations or pushed off the board. The ones who stay quiet get perks, like Linda Cartwright's new fencing, normally a code violation, but somehow got special approval." I thought about all the neighbors who had quietly moved away after clashing with the HOA. This wasn't just about strict rules. It was about control. "Speaking of Mrs. Cartwright," Detective Rodriguez said, pulling out another file. "Did you know her husband works for the city?" "Everyone knows Bob Cartwright is on some board," I shrugged. "Not some board," she corrected. "The Zoning Commission, the same one that approved Gregory's controversial Westlake development last year, the one that got rushed through despite multiple environmental red flags." My mind reeled. So when Linda started complaining about my tree, she wasn't just being picky? Rodriguez nodded. "Your property backs up to the creek that feeds into Westlake. Daniel's development has been having drainage issues.
Their environmental consultants have been looking for someone else to blame for the water contamination. I stood up so quickly I nearly knocked over my coffee. That's why they wanted my tree gone, to get access to the soil, take samples. Smart, Rodriguez agreed. The tree crew told us they were specifically instructed to dig out as much of the root system as possible. That's not standard procedure. Unless they wanted to get underneath the tree, I finished. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I had taken, strange, evenly spaced holes in my backyard after the tree had been removed. I thought it was just part of the removal process, but the holes were too precise, too clean. Rodriguez examined the photos closely. They were testing your soil, looking for anything they could pin on you. But that tree couldn't possibly be causing problems for a development 2 miles downstream. It doesn't have to be true, she replied. It just has to be plausible enough for Gregory to get friendly city inspectors, ones who might owe Bob Cartwright a favor, to issue citations. Enough violations, and you might be forced to sell. My stomach dropped. They want my land. Your lot sits at a critical drainage point. If Daniels Construction controls it, they can redirect blame and water away from their development. I started pacing. My thoughts raced. So this whole lawsuit about Linda's gazebo, it's just a distraction. They want to financially drain me until I give up and move. Rodriguez's expression darkened. Your neighbor Tom has been trying to fight back. He submitted 3 complaints about the HOA's suspicious accounting last year. All were conveniently lost by the board secretary. So what now? I asked, feeling both overwhelmed and electrified. Rodriguez closed the folders. This is no longer just a local police matter. The money involved here crosses state lines. Because your HOA uses a management company based in Nevada, I've contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division. The FBI? I whispered. Suddenly, the weight of what we were uncovering hit me in the chest. This goes way beyond your tree, or even Maple Glen Estates. Gregory's company holds contracts with 6 other HOAs in the county. We're potentially looking at millions in fraudulent billing, kickbacks, and bribes to city officials. My phone pinged with an email notification. I checked it, and the color drained from my face. "What is it?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "The HOA." I swallowed. They just placed a lien on my house for unpaid emergency assessments, $122,000. She didn't blink. Instead, she picked up her phone. This changes things.
They're moving faster than we expected. What do you mean? I asked. Putting a lien on your property is their first step to force a sale, Detective Rodriguez said. I need to call my supervisor and the FBI contact immediately. She stepped outside to make the call. I stared down at the documents scattered across my kitchen table. Photos of Gregory Daniels shaking hands with city officials, spreadsheets filled with inflated contracts, and maps of the Westlake development with my property circled in red. My quiet life had been upended because I stood up for a tree. And now I was caught in the middle of what looked like a small-town corruption ring, spanning neighbors, the HOA board, and city officials. Through the front window, I spotted Linda Cartwright, Mrs. HOA elite herself, standing by my mailbox, phone pressed to her ear, eyes locked on my house. She saw me watching and didn't look away. Instead, she smiled. Then she waved. A taunt, a dare. Detective Rodriguez came back inside, her expression grim. The FBI wants to move quickly, but we need more evidence. Can you attend the HOA meeting tonight and record it? Subtly. We need to hear how Gregory explains this lien to the other homeowners. Won't that be dangerous? I asked. They're already targeting me. We'll have plainclothes officers nearby, but you need to act normal, like you're still just fighting the tree removal, not on to their bigger scheme. She began gathering her files, then paused. One more thing.
Has anyone unusual been around your house lately? Workers, deliveries you didn't expect? A chill crept up my spine. The cable company came yesterday, but I didn't call them. They said it was routine maintenance. Her expression sharpened. Show me where they worked. I led her to the living room. She pulled out a small handheld device and waved it near the cable box. The detector started beeping rapidly. Just behind the cable box, she found it. A tiny black object. They're listening to you, she said quietly. The question now is, what else do they know about what we know?
I woke the next morning to the sound of glass breaking. Someone had thrown a rock through my living room window. A note was wrapped around it. Leave now, or worse will come. My hands trembled as I called the police, but I already knew who was behind it. The neighborhood I once loved had turned into a battlefield. "This is the fourth incident we've responded to this week," Officer Jenkins muttered as he took photos of the shattered window. "You've really stirred up a hornet's nest with these HOA folks." I hadn't just stirred it. I was getting stung from every direction. The day after I received the court papers about the lien, Linda Cartwright transformed into a one-woman surveillance unit. Every morning she stood at the end of my driveway, snapping photos of my house and scribbling notes. When I tried to speak to her, she turned her back and walked away. Until yesterday. "You're going to wish you never moved here," she hissed. "Nobody goes against the HOA and wins." I decided to fight back with facts. Tom and I created flyers showing the official property survey and photos of the HOA hired workers cutting down my tree without permission. We placed them on every doorstep in the neighborhood. Linda retaliated within hours. She called an emergency HOA meeting at her house. Only her loyalists were invited. Through my kitchen window, I watched 20 neighbors file into her oversized colonial across the street. Not a single one looked my way. The next morning, my mailbox was knocked over and crushed. 3 other neighbors who had shown support for me discovered their car tires slashed. "This isn't about a tree anymore," Tom said as he helped me install a new set of security cameras. "They're scared of what you might find." Installing the cameras violated the HOA's rule about exterior modifications without board approval, but I didn't care. Not anymore. Within hours, a violation notice appeared taped to my door. Unauthorized exterior devices, fine $100 per day per camera. That night, I was eating dinner when my phone buzzed with a security alert. I checked the feed and nearly dropped my fork. Gregory Daniels himself had entered my backyard, along with 2 board members I recognized from meetings. They moved with purpose. Each carried small tools and plastic bags. They began taking samples near the exact spot where my tree once stood. One of them pulled out what looked like a testing kit and bent low to the soil. Whatever he saw he liked, he stood up and high-fived another man. Then the 3 of them slipped out the side gate like burglars. I called Diana immediately and sent her the footage. "They're absolutely desperate," she said after watching. "They're trying to manufacture evidence of soil contamination to force you out on environmental grounds." I said, "This is crossing." Richard Thornton strolled in like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. He wore a tailored blazer, no tie, crisp white shirt open at the collar, the image of a man in control. The room hushed as he took his place at the front table beside Mrs. Peterson, who sat stiffly, back straight, pearls glowing under the fluorescent lights like a crown of authority. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice.
Richard began, voice smooth and rehearsed. "We have urgent matters to discuss. As you've all heard by now, a serious environmental threat has been discovered at one of our properties." He didn't say my name. He didn't have to. All eyes turned toward me. I sank deeper into my seat, heart pounding. My shirt pocket suddenly felt enormous. The pen Agent Patel had given me, which doubled as a recording device, was clipped there, its tiny red light blinking beneath the fabric. I prayed no one else could see it. "We understand this is distressing, but as your HOA president, it's my duty to act swiftly to protect our community. We cannot allow one homeowner's negligence to endanger us all." There were murmurs of agreement. Mrs. Peterson leaned toward the microphone. "I've spoken personally with the city's environmental inspector," she said with faux sorrow. "He confirmed that the toxins discovered on that property," she gestured vaguely, but everyone followed her hand to me, "are consistent with what's been affecting water quality in the Westlake Basin. This is no longer a matter of private landscaping or tree disputes. It's about public safety." Lies, all of it, but well delivered. The crowd stirred, anxious. Some crossed their arms, others whispered to their neighbors. I saw a couple I used to walk dogs with shake their heads in my direction. Richard stood again. "In accordance with Section 9.3 of the Oak Ridge Estates Covenant, we are proposing an emergency resolution to begin legal proceedings to seize and resell the contaminated property in question. The homeowner will be compensated per fair market value minus cleanup costs." Minus cleanup costs, which, conveniently, he'd inflated to 6 figures in the lien. "Any discussion before we vote?" he asked. I stood, throat dry, legs trembling. "I have something to say," I managed. The room quieted. "I didn't dump anything. There's no contamination. This is all retaliation because I filed a police report about an illegal tree removal. Since then, I've been harassed, targeted, vandalized, and threatened, and now you're trying to force me out based on lies." Mrs. Peterson gasped theatrically. Richard held up a calming hand. "Let's remain civil." "Civil," I said, louder now. "You sent fake hazmat workers to my yard. You put up signs to scare the neighborhood. You installed a listening device in my house. You even broke in and took soil samples, illegally." Someone near the front snorted. Another person muttered, "Here we go again." But a few faces looked uncomfortable. "You want to talk about civil," I pressed. "You want to talk about lawful? Because I have security footage. I have documents. I've been working with the authorities, and they're watching this meeting right now." Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's smile faltered just slightly. Mrs. Peterson shifted in her seat. I glanced around. Some people looked confused, others skeptical. But a few, just a few, looked unsure now. "Go ahead," I said. "Vote. Try to kick me out. But know this, every lie, every forged violation, every shady contract, it's all coming out. And when it does, you'll have to decide whether you want to go down with them." Silence. Then Richard let out a short, dry laugh. "I think we've heard enough," he said smoothly. "Let's proceed with the vote." But before he could speak another word, the back door slammed open. 2 men and 1 woman entered, holding badges. "FBI, nobody leaves the room." Gasps, chairs scraped, someone dropped a water bottle. Mrs. Peterson froze, mouth half open. Agent Patel stepped forward behind them, locking eyes with me. "You did good," she said softly as she passed. And Richard Thornton, pillar of Oak Ridge Estates, builder of Westlake, master of HOA manipulation, finally lost the color in his face.
Richard strode to the front of the room like he owned the place, tapping the microphone 3 times. He wore an expensive suit and that fake smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Good evening, neighbors and friends," he announced, scanning the room until his gaze landed on me. His smile dropped just for a second. "Tonight, we face a serious threat to our community's safety and property values." Behind him, a projector screen lit up with an image of my house. Gasps echoed across the room. The picture showed the security cameras I had installed. "As you can see," he continued, clicking to the next slide, "one resident continues to defy our rules. Unauthorized surveillance equipment, failure to clean up after the dangerous tree removal, and now," he paused for dramatic effect, "we have evidence of something even more disturbing." The next slide showed a grainy image of Richard and his associates in my backyard digging at night. He didn't mention they had been trespassing. "Our tests show concerning levels of soil contamination that could affect the entire neighborhood's water supply," Richard declared gravely. A wave of worried murmurs filled the room. Mrs. Peterson shot to her feet without being called on. "I told everyone that property was trouble from the start," she cried. "My little Pomeranian won't even walk on that side of the street anymore. Animals can sense these things." I wanted to jump up and shout the truth, but Agent Patel's words echoed in my head. "Don't react. Let them bury themselves." Tom, my only ally on the block, raised his hand. "Can we see those soil test results? And who performed them?" Richard waved him off dismissively. "My company has specialists for this sort of thing. The technical details aren't important right now." "Seems convenient," Tom muttered, but most people ignored him. Richard advanced to a new slide showing a section of the HOA bylaws highlighted in red. "According to Section 23, Paragraph C, the board can vote to begin eviction proceedings against any homeowner who presents a clear and present danger to community welfare." Mrs. Peterson nodded, her voice sharp and dramatic. "It's for the safety of our children." I looked around the room at people I had waved to every morning for 5 years. Most avoided my eyes. A few looked unsure, but nobody else spoke. Richard stood taller, sensing the shift. "Before we vote," he added, "you should also know fighting this will be expensive and futile. The HOA has full backing from my company's legal team." He didn't notice the back door of the community center opening. A woman in jeans and a plain blouse slipped in quietly and sat near the rear. Detective Rodriguez, undercover, right on cue. "Now then," he said, his voice smooth, "all in favor of beginning eviction proceedings?" Bang! The main doors burst open, slamming against the walls. 3 figures in dark blue jackets with bold yellow FBI lettering stepped into the room, followed by 4 others carrying boxes and briefcases. The crowd gasped. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Richard sputtered, his face flushing crimson. "We're in the middle of an important community vote." Agent Patel stepped forward, flashing her badge. "Richard Thornton, I'm Special Agent Patel with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We have federal warrants to search all HOA financial records, your business documents, and any electronic devices." The room exploded with noise. Mrs. Peterson leapt to her feet, her pearl necklace bouncing against her chest. This is outrageous! Richard is a respected businessman." Agent Patel didn't acknowledge her, turning instead to her team. "We also have warrants for Margaret Peterson, James Jenkins, and Sarah Williams, board members currently under suspicion of criminal activity." Mrs. Peterson's face turned from furious red to paper white.
This is all a misunderstanding. I barely even look at the financial reports." Richard lunged toward his laptop, but an FBI agent was already there. "Sir, please step away from the computer. Attempting to destroy evidence is a separate federal offense." "Evidence of what?" someone called from the back. Detective Rodriguez stood up and addressed the room. "The Oak Ridge Estates HOA has been under investigation for over 6 months. We have reason to believe more than $1 million in homeowner fees were embezzled through fraudulent maintenance contracts and kickbacks to city officials." Shock rippled through the room like a physical wave. Neighbors turned to each other, mouths open. "That's why our fees kept going up," shouted Mr. Johnson from across the room. "I can barely afford the $600 a month." Mrs. Peterson tried to push past an agent toward the exit. "I need to check on my dog," she cried. "Ma'am, please remain seated," the agent responded without flinching. Richard tried to recover, straightening his tie. "My attorneys will clear this up immediately. This is clearly a vindictive action orchestrated by him, that troublemaker who refused to follow our reasonable rules." I stood. All eyes turned to me, and somehow my voice came out steady. "The tree was just the beginning," I said. "When they came after me, I started asking questions. I pulled public records. I followed the money. I reached into my folder and held up printed copies of contracts. These documents show Richard's company charging double for basic maintenance, falsifying invoices, and pocketing the difference. HOA funds weren't being used to fix sidewalks or maintain the park. They were being siphoned off to offshore accounts." A few neighbors gasped again. Others began whispering more urgently now. Agent Patel nodded at me in quiet approval. "Thank you," she said. "That will help." Richard looked like he might say something, might fight, but he saw the agent stepping closer. And for the first time that night, he sat down.
"The HOA tripled the normal rate for basic repairs," I said, holding up the evidence. "They've been stealing from all of us for years." "Lies!" Mrs. Peterson shrieked, but her voice cracked. Tom stood up beside me. "Is it a lie," he asked, "that your husband approved Richard's development project right after the HOA gave his company an exclusive landscaping contract?" Mrs. Peterson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. An FBI agent walked over to the podium computer and opened one of Richard's files. The contents projected onto the big screen. A spreadsheet listing all our names, addresses, and notes about which residents might cause compliance issues. Next to my name, in bold red text, it read, "Target for removal. Property needed for detention pond expansion." "What's a detention pond?" someone asked from the crowd. Agent Patel stepped forward. "It is a stormwater drainage basin required for Mr. Thornton's new condo development project, 3 blocks from here. Without it, he can't build. According to these documents, he planned to push several of you out to make space for it." The room erupted into chaos. People who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly swarmed with questions, shock, and apologies. I heard my name spoken over and over, but I wasn't angry. I was just done. Mrs. Peterson sat off to the side, alone now. Even her closest friends had moved away from her. She stared at her hands in silence, her pearls still, her posture deflated. In the corner, Richard was being read his rights. Across the room, agents had begun interviewing residents one by one. I slipped outside for a breath of air. The night was still, the only sound a pair of distant sirens fading down the freeway. I looked down my street, block after block of identical houses with trimmed lawns, hedges cut to regulation height,
porch lights all on timers. And for the first time in months, I felt like I might actually get to keep mine.